comments on the annual plan, so we'll kick that off. I'll get Jordan to open with a karakia. Thanks, Jordan. No, you do it ad lib.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, ke mā kene ki uta, ke mā taratara ki tai, he aka ana te atakura, te au he huka, he hauhu ti hei mauri ora.
Jordan. Right, we'll jump straight down to Janine. Let's rip into it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless the Chief Executive wants to say anything. Oh, we'll rip into it then. Yes, so thank you for your attendance today. I guess the intention of the workshop is to provide you an overview of the proposed annual plan budget for next year as it currently sits. We really are seeking your feedback on the content of that proposal and identification on areas where further information may be needed, and we'll bring that back to you in February. So there is still obviously some room to move in terms of what we have presented, but it's an opportune time to get your feedback on levels of comfort, expectations and the like. Key to that is going to be some agreed direction on the level of rates increases for the annual plan. And just noting, and I've referenced it in the workshop pack, proposal from central government around rates capping, and that while not required to comply with that, an expectation that councils take consideration of it from the 1st of January 2027, which happens to fall in the middle of the financial year that we're looking at today. So, look, I'll be preaching to the choir in terms of this next slide, but just to recap in terms of our local government planning and reporting cycle, which is based around development of long-term plans every 3 years, with 3 years of information prepared in detail, 7 years indicative, and then in the intervening years, preparation of annual plans, which is the opportunity to check in on our thinking when the long-term plan was developed and to make adjustments within the budget to address those. There are certain decisions that can only be taken through a long-term plan, such as significant changes in levels of service or divestment of strategic assets. And the key aspect of that is the need for consultation with the community around any of those key changes, as well as the need for audit. Obviously, in the middle of this 3-yearly cycle, we have triennial elections. And so a new council coming in, once an LTP has been adopted, and as we're in the starting a financial year and then starting to build the planning budget setting for the next year. So that's sort of just the point that we're at the moment. And the cycle has always been that way in terms of a new council effectively coming in the middle of an LTP. With next year, we will very much be into the development of the next LTP, all other things remaining unchanged, obviously. In terms of the environment that we're in with developing this annual plan, for fear of stating the obvious, we are in a period of significant and generational change for the local government sector. So there's a number of significant pieces of legislation that are moving through the House or proposed seeking feedback. So we've got simplifying local government, we've got a rates capping proposal, local government system improvements amendment bill, as well as the resource management reforms. At the moment, the budget as proposed doesn't make any specific provisions for these because the actual extent or timing of them is still reasonably uncertain. It does raise the potential that whatever decisions we make now and into early next year, we may need to adapt those before the annual plan is adopted and rates set in June next year. So we will be keeping a watching brief on that. There are just some key decisions that we're seeking or that Council is needing to make through this annual plan process. And most of these shouldn't be new to you. Certainly the first one won't be in terms of what is the pathway forward for Te Huia, with options or considerations around continuation of the trial service for another 12 months, as well as what is the funding assistance rate that NZTA will approve in relation to that service. Depending on those different pathways, they will have different consultation requirements, from none to consulting on an amendment to the LTP. One of the new matters that's canvassed in the report, and Brent will speak to you today on it, is utilisation of funds that have been accumulated as a result of delays with the implementation of freshwater farm plans. So there's about $2 million of targeted rate funding that's been set aside with delays with the implementation of PC1 and government regulations. And so there's an option to consider how those funds might be used over the coming year or years. And then there's also the application of the prior year surplus funds, which is a matter that councillors existing should be well aware of. In terms of the budget that is in front of you, the rates revenue is about $162 million, so just shy of a $10 million increase from the 25-26 annual plan, but it is lower than was projected in the LTP. And that's predominantly as a result of the decisions coming out of the National Land Transport Plan just after the LTP was adopted, which meant that planned service improvements haven't been able to be funded and progressed. So the 25-26 annual plan saw a reduction from the levels there. And there are also some areas of the budget that are still under review by staff in order to reduce the proposed funding, and will obviously feedback from you today will inform some other areas that we will go and look at before we come back to you formally in February. So what does that mean in terms of the proposed rating impact? So the budget as it currently stands results in an increase to current ratepayers of 4.8%. If we were to get that back in line with the 4.2% increase that was proposed in the LTP, that would mean savings of about 800,000. If we were to achieve an increase in rates from current ratepayers in line with current CPI of 3%, we'd need to find savings in the order of 2.6%. But just to note that the budget as it currently stands is largely in line with the proposed limit on rates under the rate capping proposal of 4% per capita. Noting that there's a whole heap of assumptions that are required around the proposed methodology. This is a very simple calculation of literally 25-26 per capita. What does within 4% of that look like for 26-27? And there are various machinations contained in the rates capping proposal that complicate that and are not necessarily easy or quick to calculate at this point in time with the amount of information we have available. But I think we're in about the right ballpark in terms of expectations that may be coming at us from that perspective. Some of the key budget drivers in terms of the shift in expenditure from 25-26 to the proposed annual plan. We have about $3.6 million of contracted inflation. So particularly around our public transport services where we are required to pay indexation or inflation on those. And I think that's running at about 7%, or certainly is this year. So that's a key contributor to our increase in costs. We also have provided for the first market rent review in terms of the lease on this building. And there is some risk around the assumptions that we've currently made for that, that we are seeking some external advice to just make sure we're well informed of what the market may be doing in terms of that forward lease cost. Obviously, we make provision for market and performance increases for staff remuneration. We take external advice on that. And that advice at the moment is saying for the year to September 2025, the movement's about 2%. So we've made provision for that within the budget. Additionally, in relation to staff costs, the government changes to the minimum KiwiSaver contribution going from 3% to 3.5% kicks in from the 1st of April 2026. So that has an additional cost to us of about $440,000. Through the long-term plan, a series of business cases were approved and they're set out in the report, but that sees a $1.3 million uplift in expenditure in 26-27. And then we're seeing through Civil Defence Emergency Management, with the cessation of service level agreements with a number of territorial authorities, we're actually seeing an uplift in the rates funding that's required for the group following that, and there'll be staff in the room who can speak to that. And additionally, final point in terms of the budget drivers, there are 3 new investment cases that are proposed through this annual plan, which currently in these numbers add just over $1 million of expenditure into the budget, with some revisions to that I can present for you today. Perhaps if I just pause there to see if there's any early questions. The next step was just to go through obviously the different pieces of legislation that are at play for us at the moment, but in terms of that initial overview of key budget drivers, whether there's comments or questions.
Chris.
Thanks, Chairman Warren. Janine, just a couple of questions. The first one relates to the locked-in agreements and the public transport being 7% per annum. How was that arrived at? Do you know?
NZTA provide those rates.
So is that a forward projected rate?
Yep, so I've got Phil nodding to my side.
When did we agree to the 7%?
So I guess we don't agree to it. We are required under our contracts to pay indexation on those contracts, which NZTA advise on what those indexation rates are.
So are we allowed to challenge that? Because we all know that the rate of inflation is lower than that now.
I think it depends on what your reference for inflation is. CPI is not the driver of transport costs. So there are different cost considerations that NZTA will be taking into account and advising on what that indexation rate is. I think Phil's just getting a mic, so.
If I can get a mic, I have got a speaking order. If you can turn your mics off, please. Keith, yours off.
Turn it off.
Yeah.
So just in addition to what Janine has said, those rates are set nationally by NZTA, and we're advised of them every year, at this point in the year every year.
I guess my question is, what right of challenge do we have? Because it's all very well for NZTA to impose increases on us, but who's holding them to account? If we don't say to them, well, we're not happy to accept that, go back and please do your homework again. Do we have that right of challenge or not? Like it just seems wrong that we are put over a barrel.
Well, I guess they're also the 51% funder for a whole heap of those costs as well. So I'm not aware that there's any.
But it drives a significant change in our budget, that's all.
So we had modelled, we had used NZTA's estimates as part of the creation of the long-term plan, and this is a change to what was in the long-term plan. So we've been using NZTA numbers throughout the whole of the process of the formation of our 10-year story, and then this is the annual plan piece of that.
Chris, I understand your question.
Yeah.
I'll go and contact NZTA and ask what the ability is to contest those numbers.
Thanks, Chris. That's much appreciated. The other question I had, Janine, is in relation to CEDAM. The territorial authorities, if I understand things correctly, have cancelled service level agreements. So in other words, they've moved the cost out of their lot into our lot. Have we got an ability to reallocate that back as a targeted rate against those territorial authorities?
So remembering that civil defence is funded through a per property rate across every rating unit in the region. So this has come about up until this year. We've had 5 roles that the civil defence group have employed with funding through a service level agreement to meet those costs. When those service level agreements have been unwound and the cost of the staff have come out, the revenue, which has been found to be higher than those costs, has also come out. So there's a shortfall of the 387,000. So that will be an impact for the current financial year as well as going into the LTP. And I know that Julian, as the controller, is looking at what they need to do to help mitigate that funding shortfall. So in terms of being able to target those territorial authorities, I guess if I flipped that around a little bit, those territorial authorities have in essence been contributing greater revenue into the costs of the group up until now through those service level agreements. It would be a completely different funding mechanism to put a targeted rate over them than the uniform funding mechanism that we have at the moment.
Thank you.
Keith.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Janine, just in terms of the rate increase, you talk about a 4.8%, hopefully bring it down to 4.2%. Does that include a basket of rates, including targeted rates? So can you just break down the difference between targeted rates and rated on property? Thanks.
Yes, certainly. So in your agenda, and I'm sorry, I do have a hard copy, so I haven't got a page number, but it's about page 4. There is a table that shows the breakdown between general rates, UAGC, and targeted rates. And of the targeted rates, the first 3 on that list, while they are targeted to the purpose, so that's Civil Defence, Regional Services Fund and Natural Heritage, while they're targeted to a specific purpose, they are applied on a per property basis. So everybody pays the same for those. Whereas the ones underneath that are differential, so different groups of people are paying different amounts. And so the majority of the change is coming in terms of transport, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. And there's 1.9 million in catchment rates, which is obviously distributed across the different zones and catchment areas. So that's probably the important breakdown there.
Can you use your mic, Keith? You might turn it off here.
I haven't got it in front of me because my computer's been confiscated, but is there a percentage rise? Yeah, but in terms of percentage, the likes of the Te Huia and the catchment, what's the increase there?
can I come back to that?
Yeah.
I might
Yeah.
I'll pop a slide in once we've got a break that can provide that information if that's
Thank you.
okay.
Ben,
It was similar, but just following up on Chris's point, the $387,000 extra for civil defence, they requested and required us to give them extra staff. We didn't have a choice to say no to extra staff. That's possibly where the blowouts come from, because obviously it wasn't costed correctly. Do we have an option to change that back again? Does civil defence need to live within its budget?
Well, I think as you've said, Civil Defence have required us to previously fund roles. So the group are responsible for setting the budget. It then sits on our rates. So, and it sort of a little bit of splitting hairs in some ways that if some of the costs don't sit with Civil Defence, particularly if you're looking at organisation support costs, they will sit still with this organisation, just in a different line on our rates bill. So as I say, I know Julian is working really hard to try and mitigate this increase, which is meaning having to look at a role that's currently vacant and do they recruit into that.
Right, okay.
So they are doing that
Okay,
work.
well, that's a
Yeah.
question, yeah. And just on the table on,
well, it just depends. I'll just stop you because I think Noel's got a question just on the civil defence, just so we get continuity.
Yeah, so can I just jump in there? I think everyone around the table needs to understand, and let's step back to a comment I made, I think at the last workshop. Civil defence, we send our representative, as does every mayor in the region, to the civil defence emergency management group. They met yesterday, and in fact, I was talking to some of them here yesterday. We give them that delegation. Gary has the delegation, as do all those, there were mayors and other councillors here, the delegation to make decisions that are binding on each and every council, be they TA, city or region. And so if we send them off to do that with that delegation, they come up with a budget, we have to give effect to that budget and put the rates in accordingly. And as I was talking to a couple of mayors yesterday and some staff, I believe that we should be advocating to government that the likes of CDM rates, the impact of that should be outside of the 4% cap, because it's a figure that we have to give effect to, and it's outside our decision. We could say no, but then civil defence would be unfunded. So Waikato is also unique and is to some extent, Julian Stobel, the coordinator, it's the MD of most of the regions in the country, in that we've got this regional rate. And that was done in my time years ago. So the point I'm trying to make is we have concerns about the rate and the impact it is. We need to advocate for it to be separated or shown separately. You know, this is what business as usual, but because of this, the rates have gone up by an extra 0.25% or whatever. But you know, the delegations that we give means that we have to live with it. Thank you.
No, you've made a clear point there, Noel, that it is outside our control where.
but the point is that if they come back and want an extra $2 million and they don't have the funding for it, it's like, we have to be rational in that process. So just to the table on this one here, the table here. So it looks like the general rates in UAGC, there's an extra 1.9 million in rates coming in. The major expenditure is transport, as you say. So there's an extra $5 million basically coming in there, and 2 million extra on catchment. So those are the big ones. That gives us the jump from 84 million in 2025 to 92 now. So that's the issues we need to work through, is it? Yeah, good, thank you.
No, yeah. Microphone.
Yeah, I've made my point about civil defence. But I think one thing that we learnt from last year, and it came up through the campaigning if you were in the Waikato, is that the we talk about this 4.8, or I think it was 5.8 last year. The reality is, those of us who are farmers, the larger landowners, because of our targeted rates, the last 2 years, mine went up 15.6% last year and 18.5, I think it was the previous year. Yet many of the community who don't have targeted rates, I was talking to people from Waipa and again from Waikato, who thanked me for actually reducing the regional rate. And so the rural community went up and some of the urban community went down. And if you look at reality, that 5.8 that we went out with last year was a nonsense. It's an artificial figure. And so I think we need to be, in our communications, we need to say the overall might be 4.8 or 4 if we get to there, but the impact on our rural communities is this, and the urban communities, to average everyone out and say we've made 4%, we just get laughed at in the rural communities. So quite concerned. So I'd just like to see that those are reflected in some way in our commentary right from the start.
Mr. Chair, can I just clarify on that? So I'm always very careful in the way that I communicate to you on that percentage, that it is an increase in total rates revenue from current
I
ratepayers.
appreciate that. It's not a criticism of you.
No, yeah, and I think what we're required to do is to show example properties in terms of what the impact means. There isn't an average ratepayer in the region in terms of who would pay 4.8, 4.2%. But yeah, I did have a slide in actually to show how we actually derive the what we
I
talk
fully understand
about.
that, but when you've
Yeah.
got ratepayers saying, thank you very much for giving me a negative rate increase, and other ratepayers saying,
Yeah.
mine
And-
21%, no, this is bullshit, excuse me, but that's the words I was getting told. We need to be careful on how we communicate those figures.
And there are things such as a property's valuation that obviously impact on that as well. And where you look at the drivers in terms of this annual plan of being transport, that's going to be of particular interest within Hamilton City.
I'll go to Chris, just for a comment.
Yeah, we're on some. Noel raises a really important point, and as Janine's clarified, we talk about the increased rating expenditure required of, say, 4% or whatever. The media will nearly always report it as the rates going up by that amount, which is not correct.
Yeah.
It is a communication problem. I don't believe it's the communication problem that comes out from our official release of information, but the way you communicate it's really important, and the way the media portray it is probably where a lot of confusion reigns. And you probably saw a lot of that being reflected in Auckland in the last year, where their rate increase supposedly was X%, and then people said, well, theirs was going up 50%, depending where they lived and whatever, for the very reasons mentioned. But the communication is critically important about how we describe this.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Noel. And I know it comes up at every time we discuss rates and that sort of thing, that it is misleading as such. And I think to Chris McLeod's point, that it is, a lot of that is the media, and that a lot of our ratepayers understand how it all works. But yeah, when it comes out from the media, that's it. It's just a blanket. Rates are going up by such and such, and it's not how it's articulated out of here. Chris Hughes.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, look, I'd just like to confirm that too. I think the team have done a great job in terms of putting it together in here and explaining it in here. It's absolutely clear. We've got no control over what the people down the road publish it. But Noel, I just want to go back to a point that you raised before, and it concerns me that this is coming from the mayors about their apparent feeling that they can just pass on whatever costs they want to, because I've got no qualms with funding CEDAM. The message that we need to be getting across to these people is that they must be conscious of cost increases and limiting their cost increases to not more than the level of inflation. That's what we're being asked to do in Wellington. There's a rates capping process being put in place. If these guys don't understand that, and I know they don't, because I've spoken with mayors as well, and they just seem to be ignoring what we're being told to do. And they're going to have a bit of a rude shock when they come in here and start to try and
Yeah, and if I could
and
just,
work on a cost plus mentality.
yeah, I didn't get the feeling yesterday, if I conveyed that they can do what they like, they essentially can, but I've never seen a group in around the table actually going for the gold-plated standard. They're very, very conscious of the effects of the rating. But some of the edicts that are coming out of government and some of the mistakes, as you well know, with Hawke's Bay and elsewhere around the country, the emergency responses haven't been up to scratch. And so directives are coming out of Wellington that are requiring civil defence to do more, and more means cost. So I think, I was talking to Axel and a few of the others yesterday, and Jen, and particularly the controller. He's very, very aware that he has to be tight. It's in a very restricted market right now. He cannot ask for too much, but they've got to do what the government's directing. So they're like us. We're in between a rock and a hard place ourselves. So
Yeah, I think, thanks, Noel. I think we've got that, and we're well aware, Julian's well aware of those constraints around councils. Robbie?
I was just going to go back to that question about the rate increase that, like, last term when we were here, too many times in the media that had come out, we were one of the lowest in the country, and we weren't. So we actually, some of that media we did ourselves, selling a pitch that wasn't correct. So I just hope everyone remembers that they were a part of that last time, and there was a few of us, Noel and myself and others, that stood up and said, well, we're actually getting 15 and 20% rate increases, but this thing of, well, we're one of the lowest in the country at 4% or 5%, whatever it was keep throwing out in the media every single time.
Angela?
Oh, it's been asked and answered, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gary Maguire.
What has come out is that CD was basically a dead duck up until recently, and that the public had been asked for their opinion whether they wanted higher or better coverage, and that they're at the time they were prepared to pay higher amount, which is what has been mentioned around the table, but it had been sort of limited to the existing budget. So if in the event of a major emergency we need the cavalry to come, then we need to fund it, is the way I see it.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, just wanted to go to item 11 on here, which is talking about the population growth assumptions. Immigration is significantly down. Like so many are going to Australia, we're not getting the migrants coming in. Your assumption, if population growth is lower than expected, you'll need budget reductions, and if no growth is assumed, you need to save 3.3 million. Where are we at with the population projections?
Look, Ben, I think this is one of the challenges with the rates capping mechanism, is where we actually source information such as population growth from, because the rate is stated, well, I think the ministers in announcing it had stated that the increase is applied per capita, so population. There has also been or per rating unit. Now, the rating unit's a little bit easier to determine, but somebody needs to, if it's per capita, where do we source that population information from? So what I have used in this was the population data per the DIA performance measurement benchmarks, which was as at 2024, and the growth rate that was included in there is an independent, verified, government published source. And so I've wound that 2.1% population growth for the region, because it's just about the region, forward. But this is part of the challenge of the space that we're in at the moment, that we need to be cognizant of the rates capping, but the actual detail on how they would be calculated is unclear at this point in time. So doing best endeavours with a bunch of assumptions.
And also the government's canned the census, so we're not going to be getting data on that in the future either. So, I mean, do you get to the end of the year and find out your population projections were wrong and that there aren't?
Look, I don't know, and we'll have a chance to talk about that proposal, because we do have an opportunity to put a submission in, even if it's coattailing on some other organisations. So it would be useful to get some feedback, noting that government's only wanting quite specific feedback in terms of will it work or won't it? What are the not necessarily in the different elements included? But yeah, that's part of the current challenge.
You got a question on this, Chris? Otherwise, I want to move on. I don't want to get down too much into the weeds. It's
Sure.
going to be covered further down the track.
That's the point. Are we going to have a discussion on this further down the track? Okay.
Next up
Yes.
in the
Oh,
Well, mine was on the same thing. The issues, I thought we used the university, and my concern would be different councils are using different things, and therefore are we consistent in our messaging?
yeah.
Okay. So next section was just around the various pieces of legislation that we're trying to navigate our way through. Tracy, do you want to come and grab a seat?
Oh, I can just present from here,
Oh.
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
So I need
So,
to press
well,
once.
yeah. So, well, come and sit here so I can see the whites of your eyes and we can. So I'll start in terms of some of these, and while Tracy's making her way to the table. Local Government System Improvements Amendment Bill. This is one that has been in its legislative process since July 2025, so shouldn't be too new to you. Its purpose is around the refocusing of the purpose of local government, providing some of the increased accountability and transparency, measures for council performance, the prioritisation of core services and definition of what they may be, as well as some aspects such as standardising, code of conduct, standing orders as well are covered within this. So in terms of the amended purpose for local government and this changed coming out of the, which body was it? Right, after the first reading, sorry, I haven't got quite the right terminology here, to expand or clarify the purpose of local government. And so as it stands at the moment, it's to meet the current and future needs of communities for good quality, cost-effective and local infrastructure, public services and performance of regulatory functions, and to support local economic growth and development. One of the key changes is to acknowledge, in terms of the core services, the list in the bill will not be complete or extensive. It is an indication, and that council should prioritise their responsibilities in line with those core services that are defined. As I said, also around standardisation of code of conduct and standing orders, provisions around elected member access to documents that are necessary to you being able to effectively perform your duties, and some provisions around the terms of employment for chief executives. The next one, which you've had time to, I guess, workshop a couple of weeks ago, is on simplifying local government. So obviously the two-step process proposed, removal of current regional councils with mayors to step in to lead this entity, with potential for Crown Commissioners to be part of that governance body as well. And then the second step, once that transition has occurred, for that Board of Mayors, the CTB, to prepare the regional reorganisation plan within 2 years, with that needing to be approved by the government. Interestingly, so regional councils will be required to fund the development of those regional reorganisation plans. But just probably a little bit of a footnote here, and probably relevant to the resource management reform as well. The rapid review of regional council roles and functions in terms of what will remain local and what may be centralised or discontinued. And so that rapid review is expected to be completed by DIA by March next year. The next one in terms of rates capping, so we've started a conversation on this. So this is the proposal that provides those maximum and minimum thresholds of rates increases, so between 2 and 4%, and to be expressed as either per person or per rating unit. There've been some different messages on that, with that range to be reviewed every 3 years. The cap would apply across all rates, and it's noted as applying to the price component of rates, not the volume growth. And so that in itself needs clarifying. My interpretation of that is that the volume growth is effectively from population or rating unit growth that is on top of the pure 2 to 4% increase in revenue. So very much aligned with the way that we calculate our rating impacts now, that we take into consideration growth. Within the cap, council needs to comply with those core service requirements and the narrower purpose statement for local government as per the System Improvements Amendment Bill. So I guess saying there's a smaller basket of goods that local government should be considering within that rates cap. For higher growth councils, there may be an additional growth component added on top of that 2 to 4%, and there will be some regulatory oversight in terms of compliance with those benchmarks. So now, my apologies, this is possibly a little small and fuzzy, but this is the full model of the calculation. So you can see that it's actually divided into 2 halves. There's an OPEX side of the model, which is what I've tried to reflect. So providing that inflation to GDP plus population growth on the OPEX side. But then there's also this plus capital provision, which takes into account depreciation, quality of infrastructure and population growth over average residential population. So you can see a number of challenges within that model in terms of, it's talking about residential population to start with, which isn't hugely relevant, if at all, to us with the nature of our infrastructure. There is some sort of measure around the quality of infrastructure, and you would need that to be a standardised way of considering that quality as well. So a lot of questions that get raised through the model in terms of the application of it. But not much time to respond. So submissions are open until the 4th of February only. It's expected that early in the new year, we'll see the final policy decisions and that translated into legislation. From the 1st of January 2027 is the beginning of that transition period, so needing to take account or consider those limits, even though you're right in the middle of a financial year. And then by 1st of July 2029, that councils will be required to fully comply with them. So I guess today is probably an opportunity to gather a little bit of feedback from elected members on the model, noting that staff will be working on a submission. Initially, it was only LGNZ and Tai Tuara and councils outside of LGNZ that had been invited to provide feedback on the proposal. Te Uru Kahika have since been invited to provide feedback as well. and LGNZ and conversations that I've been involved with them have been of the mind that if there's any submissions that councils would like to make, they are happy to append those to their own submission if they can't be made directly. So they do want to be a conduit, I guess, for this feedback. So yeah, maybe just this is probably one of the new bits, as well as then REM for council to be aware of and providing feedback on. Given the 4th of February, I don't think we've got the chance to bring this back through a formal submission process to you, hence the call for any feedback today.
Thanks, Janine. So we'll pause there for questions. I've got a couple, but also just noting that our talk with Vanessa from DIA allowed the potential for us to submit directly to her, for her to then include that submission back into government.
Yeah, so that process has been kicked off internally. I will also be one of the authors of the Te Uru Kahika submission, so we'll have some alignment there as well.
Yeah, so for me, it is critical that councillors do have oversight of this and submissions going in. Ben? No, I'll come to you.
Okay, so could we go back to the centralisation of government functions? That one there, sorry.
One, or the certifying local.
One forward.
Oh, the rapid
Next.
review.
Yeah, the rapid review. Yeah, so I just wanted to, I mean, I've got a concern about this rapid review because the interesting thing with centralising government, the functions to central government, is that they then have to pay for them. Presumably. So if they take over biosecurity, then they are responsible for paying for that, because we won't be necessarily rating for that anymore if regional councils disappear into unitary. Is that fair comment?
Yeah, it depends on what the vehicle for centralisation is, I guess.
Yeah.
Intuitively, you would say central government may not want to take these back because there will be an additional cost to them and a transfer from ratepayer back to taxpayer. But I guess it depends on is there a different model in terms of centralisation, and do those functions come with a charging mechanism as well, so a fees and charges mechanism. The one that's obviously been talked about is in the compliance monitoring and enforcement. That's a chargeable activity. So if you've got a revenue stream that attaches to it, it might not be the same issue.
The problem with consent monitoring and enforcement, you've got to go and fly the area to find the people who are doing the wrong thing before you can target them and then go to the Environment Court and hit them up for the fine. So you've got a large infrastructure cost to begin with, but that's now not funded. It's
crosses, yeah, probably.
Partly yes. We're yet to see what the whole new permitted regime is, permits that are going to come under the RMA. So compliance monitoring enforcement, which isn't just consents monitoring enforcement, is a different thing. It will look quite different, because it is highly likely that there will be conditions in all these new permits or permitted activities, and Brent might know a bit more about this, but that will require notification to the regulator if someone's going to undertake them. So once the regulator knows that someone's undertaking it, they could turn up at any time, whoever it is, whether it's a government department or whether it's something like we have now, and it will become a user pays regime. That's what the government has signalled. That's what you've heard, Brent?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's what we're hearing. I guess the quid pro quo, if I can put it that way, of the government moving to more of a permissive regime, that those permissions would come with notification. There are some subtleties about what one will be able to charge for and what one won't be able to charge for, and we'll pick that up through the submission process so that that's absolutely clear both for the regulated party and for the regulator. Some of the language has been around whether or not an enforcement officer has identified non-compliance. And so that we just need to get that wording just right, because you need to have a regime which enables you to go out and check on things. Often you're checking to make sure things are good and reinforcing that things are good. But fundamentally, Chris, your commentary there is correct.
But that was my point, is that you've got to go and check. If I'm about to spill effluent, I'm not going to put up my hand and let you know I'm about to do this. So that's when you can find me. So I'm just worried, and Biosecurity New Zealand haven't done a great job with clams and things like that. So we've already got issues sitting there. It's just, it'd be interesting to see what they do take back. And if they don't take it back, then who funds it in future? Because when you get to a new unitary, it will be capped at 4%. Unless what's happening is they're going to segment off like water, and suddenly my water bill will go up and my compliance bill will go up, and but the overall minimal cap will be 4%.
So we know that part of the rhetoric or commentary from central government is Waters does move out of this, and so therefore that creates headroom within the system.
Fine.
But reality, yeah.
And the other one was to go to the rates capping one. Next one over, I think. Next one. Yeah, the quality of infrastructure. I mean, it looks interesting that, and I guess that's the point Wayne Brown is making in Auckland, is that he needs 7.5%, 7.9% to be able to pay the CRL to have quality infrastructure. And so it looks as though the quality of infrastructure will decline to meet the rates cap, given that you won't be bidding high to do what you need, because that's all, as you say, the CapEx is forward looking. It's not, yeah, in Hamilton, yeah.
Yep. And just how that's all defined, what the scenarios look like if you've got newer infrastructure versus older infrastructure and the condition of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is the extent of information that we have to provide feedback on. But I think there are some challenges around setting short-term rates cap for what is some quite long-term decision-making that's required, particularly if you're talking infrastructure, but the cap's set on a 3-yearly basis. So I think that's one of the key points within the way that the model is proposed.
So it's just to raise that, so you take that into.
Thank you, Ben. That's what the mayors are all battling with at the moment. That'll be what they'll be thinking about over Christmas. Mikhail online.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Ben's kind of covered a certain amount of it. What I was going to ask, the big thing for me is that, it's come central government has the responsibility, and it's saying what the responsibilities of local government, but it's where the cost lays, or what they're going to take up with the cost is the grey area, because with CAPS rating, and then they're saying virtually, stick to these core services, or, as Ben said, quality of infrastructure, but it doesn't say what central government will take up on costs, because it's hard to look in the crystal ball and then have a rates cap and then to see what future responsibility is going to go back down on mayors. The other question that I've got is on the timeline. Janine, if you could just go back to that timeline. Yeah, I find it quite funny that it says, 1st of July 2029, and then at the end it's kind of got, unless given an exemption to do so. Why would they put that in there? Have you got any clue on that?
I think it probably refers to some of the high growth councils. There have also been they've also been concerns for some of those councils that have been hit by severe weather events, and so their cost structures are currently high, and they can't, the recovery period for that is going to be quite long. And so the expectation to be able to do
Gisborne and that.
Yeah, Gisborne, top of the south in terms of Nelson, Tasman.
Yeah, Tasman.
And so there's no way that they can do recovery within a 2 to 4% rates cap. So I think it'll be considerations like that. Yeah, yeah. And as Tracy said, events that might happen between now and then.
Yep. Thanks, Mikhail. Keith.
Yeah, to you, Chair, and Chris. I'm just struggling with the process. So one, we've got an annual plan that we will need to adjust, and we need to budget in some of these extra things we're having to do, and probably some resource in there. The other part is the process going forward so that we can have oversight on it, Warren. And in terms of that, I'm making a suggestion, but it's for us to be able to track through the decision process. So we're just talking about a lot of things that need some questions and answers, and it'd be really good if we had a live document that was updated as we got answers and solved some questions or had some negotiation points. And so that you said yourself, Warren, you want a council oversight, but we need to be actively involved in seeing the steps. So it's not going on behind the scenes and Janine and the team are making submissions without us actually understanding why we've gone to these points.
Tracy.
Yeah, if I can just help out there. So our intention is to get all submissions before council formally endorsed where we have been afforded the time to do so. And that hasn't occurred in all instances. This here, yet to be prettied up, is us two sides, is everything that's going on next year out to 2029. So as we get more information, more intel, it will be going in a central document. This will be married up with your meeting schedule. We already have a pretty jam-packed Stratham Poll meeting on the 16th of February, where it coincides. We've already scheduled in or asked Dave for some time and workshops before we go into those meetings. So where the government affords us an ability to lodge a formal submission, with the rates capping one, they didn't. They were doing it, as Janine said, through Local Government New Zealand and Tai Tuara. The regional sector said, hey, what about us? Now Te Aru Kahika, but it's not a actual formal submission process, as it is asking for comments on a two-pager, and it is a two-pager, and they've said by the 4th of February. So in accordance with this, council does not come in the doors again until the 5th of February, which will be your workshop on RM reform. So we will endeavour to get. We don't send our submissions or informal comments around to every councillor and have comments by email, because it just doesn't work. I can tell you that it doesn't work. But what we will do is we will make all good endeavours to get our chair across it and our deputy chair across it where we can. It's not the way we like doing business, because we will bring them before council for formal endorsement, but we're constrained in this time frame.
Thanks, Tracy. And I have confidence that we will be across everything that we can be through that process. Also noting that we don't know where the RM submissions are going to drop. Obviously, potentially once that select committee comes back.
Select committee's meeting today,
yeah.
So we should know today when. There's a vicious rumour that it's 6 weeks. Select committee doesn't have credence of working days, so it's actually proper days. So it might be the end of January.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll wait with bated breath. Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just, since you're asking, I'll give you my honest opinion, but I know that you can only take parts of it, because I know a lot of other councillors would probably like us to, and I understand why, obviously just go with the flow of what central government's talking about, because that's how they're likely to take into account the small parts where we might be able to tweak things. But I'm highly critical of the entire drip feeding of how this has all changed. I feel like the conversation that New Zealand should be having is what functions at what levels and what financing. And that seems to be relegated to small little things like the rapid review by the DIA, who's, I'm just not sure that they've got the capacity or whatever it might be, to do that to the extent that it would have been done if it was a big community conversation. So I criticize it because it's such a top-down thing on what I see as local government being such a beautiful bottom-up thing. And so something that we have had in this council, to try and be positive, something we've had in this council is that self-imposed cap, that 10%, we put the graph in every annual report, annual plan, that we don't raise our average rates by that amount, and it always tends to come in under that in the whole 6 years I've been there. Now we could change that number, and that would have been, in my view, a better way of councils, through consultation with their community, figuring out what their own rates cap is. So that would be one thing I'd say is, this is another way that it could be done. And I worry that whilst there's a lot of talk about simplifying it, that model you have up there does not look simple to me, and I don't know how I'd explain it to anybody in the community. So I anticipate the rates caps will happen. I anticipate that the community will expect certain things, to Noel's point before, expecting a certain number. And then because of all the exemptions, whether that's water or CDM or whatever else, they're going to be disappointed. And so we're going to then, well, maybe not us, but someone that's an elected member is going to cop that. And so all in all, by taking that autonomy away, by being able to set the cap from bottom up, I think there'll be a lot of unintended consequences, and it's not quite going to meet its goal. I really appreciated Brad Olsen's opinion piece, which is around central government maybe think about capping some of its taxing that it's doing if it's going to do it to us. And ultimately, I just worry that the rapid review of that DIA is doing is not going to look at central government functions that could be devolved to local government to be able to deliver on things better. So that's just my raw, honest opinion on all of it. And welcome to just mix it in with the rest there. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Noel.
Just a passing question. Do council or does council get the 90% of all the fines from the Environment Court coming back? I know there's some fines that do attract the 90% back to council. I'm just interested on the budgeting for those. Not that I'm asking you to go out and screw the landowners and so we can get some more fines income. What I'm wanting to understand is, I think people understand what I actually meant. I'm just interested in the budgeting, and because of the ramping up of the fines, which I see was at 437 the other day for that pig farm. And I know fines aren't paid immediately. That was my job once, to collect them on behalf of the community. Can we just have some impact on whether that's still the case and what impact it has on the budget?
Looking at me, so I'm guessing you're looking for an answer from me. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time, Councillor, because we don't budget specifically, but we recognise that there will be fines, which effectively means that you budget. So we're not going out hunting for a certain amount of money. We're just recognising that that's the sort of order of magnitude of fines revenue that's happened in the past. And so that's where that number comes from in the budgets. It's based on what has historically been coming through. This year, we're going to be well ahead of that budget, probably because of that large fine that you've just seen. What will happen next year? It's a really good question, because there's two things that have happened at the same time. One, which potentially could increase the fines that courts put in place. But equally, because they've removed the ability for insurance to cover fines, there will be a lot more argument in court about ability to pay, which may then impact on the fines that the court sets. And also, as you've said, about when payment comes through, because over the recent times, when the insurance companies have been, if you like, running the case on behalf of their client, the insurance companies have then paid promptly. We don't know whether or not it's going to result in a lot more defended hearings because the insurance companies aren't in place. And so we've left it as per the current budgets, acknowledging that it may be higher and it may be lower. And so it's one of those things that we'll be watching closely over the 26, 27 annual plan year. So we have a little bit of information to be able to support what a longer term might look like through the LTP. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
Thanks, Brent. Robbie?
Just going into that, we prosecuted a boat owner the other day. So where does that for that prosecution, does that come out of the general pool? Is that in another division of RUD to do that prosecution? Because it's not you're taking a claim against a personal for an accident. So how does that work?
Yeah, and so that's effectively funded by public good. So because those prosecutions are under the Maritime Transport Act, the fines that are available to the court are way less than they are under the Resource Management Act. And so no doubt the cost to the council of taking that prosecution was way more significant than the fine that came through. But that's one of the costs of being a public agency when you're doing public good to get behaviour change around activities that result in significant harm. So hopefully that answers the question, Robbie. There's very low fine, but will be reasonably high cost because, but it's the right thing to do when you see those sorts of actions in the waterways.
I just that if we're going to start prosecuting boat owners, then I think, like a lot of our costs come around or the cost of operation comes out of that extra like money that to do monitoring and stuff and rule stuff. So when is it that boat owners are going to start paying? Because I don't own a boat yet. I'm supposed to subsidise them. Like
Go and buy a boat.
I don't. But like it's if that's the start of it, there's going to be more of them to come. So I'm just struggling with that a bit. But my question comes back to the original one I was going to ask until that one was brought up. Was the waters. So where does flood protection and drainage sit in the water space? Or is that going to come up later?
Oh, so in terms of with this rate capping,
Yeah.
It's not included.
Not included.
It's not outside of the cap within it.
It's within the cap, so we are capped.
Yep.
So your whole infrastructure conversation, which includes the quality and appreciation and everything, got to sit within.
Either new infrastructure is going to be within the cap.
Correct. Which is the awkwardness of when you set the capital budgets, what you can put in and not, because of the consequential impact of that in years to come.
This is the sort of feedback that staff are obviously requiring for us to make a submission. So we've heard, I think they get that point. Ben?
Yeah, just your point earlier about exemptions for the rates cap. I think there's somewhat of an irony that the places where they may get an exemption are the very places where there are unitary councils at the moment. Gisborne, Nelson, Tasman would have been hit by flooding. To Jen's point, I can hear what you're saying about the unfairness of this, but I just point out that we've only got one more year, 26, 27, where we'll be setting the rates under the current regime. So that's the reality as far as I see it. So
we're still arguing to be there till the end of the term, aren't we, Ben?
yeah, but it's like the reality.
So relevance to this conversation.
Okay, the last one is Keith's point of view is in terms of the submissions, could we agree to have a meeting before the end of January online if necessary to go through the RM submissions and those sorts of things?
Potentially we can throw something in the calendar. Let's look at where those timelines land. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Really, I just want to go back to the question that Keith posed earlier on. I don't know whether we actually answered it. I think it's the process, this process that we're going through, and I think Janine's the best way to answer that, because there is a distinct process and it's very clear and transparent, which may not be apparent in this workshop because we're discussing the issues. But Janine, maybe if you could just go through that with Keith and for the new council, so I understand how this works in real life when we get to
So in terms of the annual plan process, I guess just what we're trying to do this morning is be really clear on the environment within which we're trying to do this plan and the degree of uncertainty that as an organisation we're going to need to navigate through over this 18-month period that's encapsulated by the annual plan. So we'll get through RM reform next, and then we'll be into the key decisions that are sort of in front of you in terms of the workshop papers, and then all of the other budget assumptions and things like that. So we'll be into the guts of the annual plan then. I think it is just really important that we're all on the same page in terms of the number of balls that are in the air at the moment and what we're trying to find our way through in terms of the operating environment. But yeah, next up is RM, which is Tracy can run us through, and then we'll be back into the heart of the annual plan. And so, as I said at the beginning, the intent today is to really test the waters with what's included in the proposed annual plan at the moment. Based on your feedback, staff will go away and do some work before we come back to you in February with a proposed or draft annual plan for consideration.
Can I just pick up from there? Janine, I was hoping you'd just go on to the next stage. Once we've had, all this goes back, staff rework it, come back with a new plan, and then Janine has an interactive spreadsheet. So as decisions are made, that gets fed into the spreadsheet and you can see what the effects are. So that's really room.
All yours, Janine.
Okay, so next one.
All yours, Tracy.
Yeah, all mine. So yeah, councillors, look, this diagram here is what's happening, and there's a lot happening. There always is a lot happening, I guess, but as Janine said, it is quite a shift in our operating environment. I will get this to comms so that we can lay it up like Chris did for you with what's on our plate when you first came in through the induction. So you've got it, and it will be an iterative document. So as we get new things, we can add them on. We talked about the rapid review from DIA. Read something yesterday that said government will have policy decisions on content, the process for the regional reorganisation plans to inform draft legislation, and the ministers will report back in March to Cabinet with final proposals in regard to a preliminary view, so a final proposal and a preliminary view on the transfer and cessation of powers. So as we get those bits of intel, we'll put them on here so we've all got the bits and pieces. So the Great Wellington Seagull dropped on us a couple of bits of legislation, the Planning Bill and the Natural Environment Bill. I do want to start by saying 70% of it is not new, it's just reorganised. There's a lot of process stuff in the RMA that stays in there. There's also a lot of stuff in there that we actually lodged submissions on 3 years ago when the last government took a swing at it, that is included. So there is some good stuff in there. I just want to give councillors comfort that staff aren't scared by this. Neither are staff saying we don't want this. What we do want is a system that's going to work for everybody. We know the system is to make things easier to get done, but still protecting what matters. And I think that's important. It's not making things easier to get done, full stop, because there is a need to protect what matters, not only for us and our future generations, but also for our economy, tourism sector, people carrying on doing what they're doing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that the new system is wanting to achieve. I'm not going to read that out. It is in the documentation that we sent you through for the more detailed briefing that we'll have on Thursday before council. If you feel as though you've got enough out of the 4 slides today, happy to scratch that briefing, but also it is in there so we can go through a few more things. So the purpose of the two bills is very explicit. It is not ethereal concept. It is, here are the 2 bills. The 2 bills do work in tandem, and we'll have the briefing on the 18th. Are you driving? Wonderful. This is just some high points. The roles and responsibilities for a regional entity remain. So MFE told us not to read too much into the legislation where it says regional council. I just don't think the weekend before they were getting the final I's and T's on it, which was not the weekend just been the one before, 2 days before it went to the House, they hadn't done their total search and replace of regional council into regional entity. Some of it says regional entity, some says regional council. There is still a role for a regional level approach to this new combined plan. Nothing new here. This is what was suggested by the Labor government 3 years ago. One plan for each region, whatever the region looks like. The one thing we have had confirmed is government doesn't want to fiddle around with the regional boundaries. So that's a good line in the sand. That's at least one conversation we don't need to have. The combined regional plan will start off with a regional spatial plan. We've got some runs on the board there, and full credit to the last council who said, yeah, let's get ourselves prepared, because some of the other councils are running around going, holy shit, how do we start? Oh, what did you do, WRC? Can we borrow your methodology? Sweet as, if it works for you, we'll share it. But we've made a start there. So that regional spatial plan, spatial chapter, new language is a whole new language here, guys. I've got to recondition myself. The environment chapter, which is a responsibility of the regional entity, and then the land use chapters. So many of us in the profession who have worked overseas, this is what we're used to working with. Many will also, I had the privilege, I guess, of doing a year under the Town and Country Planning Act when I started planning, and then the RMA. Most of the, I am showing my age now, most of the practitioners today have only worked with the RMA. They don't know anything different, so it's going to be a big change. The funnel of hierarchy, there's lots to talk about the funnel. It's really just codifying some existing case law, but the government is dressing it up as it's something cataclysmic. It's not. The regulatory relief package, so a lot has been talked about here. If you're going to put a rule in, you need to compensate. That is in the majority TA focus. So those who have knowledge of local TAs, SNAs, protecting heritage and sites of significance to Māori. So these are all things that usually register in a district plan. If you're going to do that, what then are you going to incentivise? Now, I had a really good conversation with one of the guys upstairs. We need to make sure there's no double dipping. And what I'm talking about there is if we're giving money to a natural heritage fund application who already has been compensated and got another development right on their property, and I'm looking at Noel because I know many of these have come across your desk in the past, suddenly we need to say, hey, is the ratepayer paying fairly here or not? So those are things we need to work through. There's a focus on systems implementation and measurement, and for those of us who have sat in meetings with MFE at the moment, it's a whole new language. Digitised systems enablement of efficient operation. You're like, yeah, what does that mean? So, we need to strip that back and really understand what it means. I think it's going to be great in terms of measuring productivity and efficiency from the system, because we don't do that at the moment. We measure and monitor at the start. We measure the effectiveness of plans. We fill in an annual report. This is how many consents we processed in this many days. But to actually understand the efficiency of the system, vicious rumour that's going to be in by 1 July this year. Sorry, this year, yeah, that's a real vicious rumour. No, next year coming up. Thanks, This is the funnel. So this is the two bills that will inform the regional plan, that will inform the spatial plan, the environment plan, and then the land use plans. Really what it's saying is lower level documents can't leapfrog up to the top. They can only leapfrog the next step up. Now, as I said, there's some fairly significant case law, King Salmon case, that kind of tells us that's how it should be done at the moment. But this is codifying it in law. Not getting into the technical detail of that, but I think this is good. I really like this. Permits, so we're going back to the old vernacular of the Town and Country Planning Act, but permits are not a get out of jail free card. They are not a golden ticket. as Brent explained, there's going to be a lot underneath that as well. Thanks, Janine.
We're going to get a briefing on Thursday, Noel. I really don't want to get down too much in the weeds, as long as it's really brief and quick.
So this is the timeline. As I said, this is the more comprehensive timeline, but we really are looking a lot at what's happening next year in 2027 throughout to 2029 with the total system turn on date in 2031. I think if we just go to the next slide. Yeah. So what I think is important in terms of your discussion today, what we have this is a quote taken from MMFE senior manager, and Brent and I were on a call last week, that there will be continual modifying of the present RMA system to keep the system stable until the new system takes effect. So that just sounds like custard to me. So last week, the government passed under urgency with no consultation Resource Management Duration of Consent Amendment Act, so extending the time frame on our consents. Brent had to do some quick maths on terms of what that means. The Fast Track Approval Amendment Act also, we believe, was passed last week. So that's truncating some timelines that are already pretty truncated. We're anticipating 2 lots of national direction before Christmas and some more next year for the first 4 months. What we also know is that there'll be a transitional consenting system with removal of special circumstances for notification, exclusion on scope of effects, a bunch of other technical things, consideration of new national standards and rules, consideration of spatial plans even before we've done environment plans and land use plans, all operating at once. As I said, it sounds a little bit custody, and it's our job to navigate through that and make it as clear as possible. What it's going to mean for the annual plan is a reprioritisation of work programs to align with the signals. So we've already read the runes, looked into the crystal ball, and the notification date for freshwater plans that was 2027 is likely to be 2028 or 2029 if you have complied with, working backwards, the notification of your plans in accordance with the timeline. So put the brake pedal down more on some projects. We're not going to have clarity for 12 to 18 months, certainly not within the time of the annual plan, and we probably won't get certainty of legislative direction until the time that you confirm the annual plan, which is June. Then we have an election, and hopefully the changes that are made will be durable and enduring past the election. Otherwise, we'll just be into this flip everything up in the air again. So we are hoping that the legislative change will have continuity. We are not asking for any more money at this stage, and I think that it is it would be imprudent to do so. And we're just saying, hey, how do we reorganise things? There is a sequencing to the planning at the moment is you need this and you need to review everything in 10 years. What this asks for is the spatial plan first, the environment plan if there is national direction. If there's not national direction, then the environment plan comes next. The environment plan, decisions on spatial plans must be made within 6 months of notification of the spatial plan, which we've got 15 months to do upon enactment. And then the natural environment plan must be notified within 9 months. So while we can say, oh, okay, we can take our foot off the pedal, there is you must notify within 9 months. We've never had that before, which is good because we can sit around and look at our neighbours unduly. So there is an awful lot in the legislation, and we'll have more conversation about that later. But just in terms of this annual plan, it is very up in the air in terms of certainty. But yeah, that's about where I'd leave it.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So Yeah, no, I didn't get enough out of your 4 slides, so we will carry on with the briefing on Thursday morning. Thank you very much. Noel, just acknowledging the fact that you may not be there on Thursday. I'm happy to ask a question or two. Okay, yep. And Jen, I have the same comment for you that.
Super quick question was just whether that briefing is open, because I'm getting a lot of questions about wanting to understand this. And so if it is, people would watch it, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely open.
Yeah, cool. Just checking because briefing.
And just in terms of the process that we will run as staff, so we've already got everybody in the organisation looking at things, but we also intend to run a session for our TA partners. So that hopefully if there is some joined up messaging coming from the Waikato to government, that would be great.
Ben, yeah, it relates to the annual plan. So the spatial plan is going to be coming in first. Is that something we'll have the staff ability to do internally? Are we going to need consultants? Is there more funds required for the spatial planning work?
So as I mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago or at the induction, we had around 900K over 4 years for the regional spatial plan project. We've carried over some funds from last year for that. The business case that was brought to council, we will refresh now that we've got more information. But again, that won't be finalised, the actual details, until the legislation's finalised. But there's enough signals in there. In the business case, we did look at fixed term roles or the ability to source consultants in order to deliver at the time. So we built in enough flexibility. I think the funding that we've got put aside at the moment, I would say is sufficient, but I put that a bunch of caveats under that until we see the final legislation. What we do know is the first step is some prioritised data sets that MFE wants, so some baselines, roads, pipes, flood banks, significant infrastructure, and we're already working on that. So at this stage, I would say I think we've got enough. I'm pretty confident. I'd say I'm about 80% confident we've got sufficient. We really need to understand what the consultation process is. If government gives us the same kind of truncated consultation process as they have, that would be great. I bet they don't. So we'd really have to wait to see what that is and what the CTB is the entity that signs off the spatial plan, what their expectations might be around it.
Tracy, just on that, so the whole spatial plan process development is going to be in conjunction with the territorial authorities. And that's
how we work to date, Chris. So we're in quite a good space.
So there's an assumption they're going to put the necessary resources into their part so everything can come together at the same time. We've tended to take a lead in the past to help guide them, to make it easier for them. And you did talk about maybe some reprioritisation of some resources. You might be able to slow some things down to speed this up.
Yes, definitely. And that's what we've been doing. I mean, we've already stopped a couple of policy projects that were on the go. The plan change for highly productive land. We've just gone no. Some of our RPS implementation, but Chris is right. None of the other councils put aside anything for spatial planning in their LTP. It was very much focused on town level and community spatial planning, which it should be. But this will be an opportunity for us to say, hey, how are we going to do it together?
This is a question possibly for Thursday, but the regional policy statement was our current mechanism. That's now being replaced by these. That's correct?
Yes, and just reading the legislation last night, because I am that person, yes, but it actually won't be wholly replaced until 2031. So we're going to be working in where the regional policy statement will have some credence, then it will start to go like that, and then the spatial plan will go like that. I'll put a diagram in for Thursday so we can see.
Just on that, obviously Te Ture Whaimana comes in through the regional policy statement, which may or may not be there in the future.
So there's a provision in the Act that all legislation comes across. Cabinet made that decision in March. There's a term that's used, a new term that's used called equivalency. I specifically asked MFE last week, hey, I don't see the Waikato Tainui Raupatu Claims Settlement Act reference, whereas the other River Iwi Acts reference. But it is referenced here by virtue of being enacted under the Treaty Waitangi Act. So it is there. Equivalency, as I understand it, there are still conversations going on between iwi and the Crown around making sure that things are translated across. There's nothing that I can see in the legislation that helps or that explicitly states where Te Ture Whai Mana would go across. So my understanding at this stage would be that it would be the Regional Spatial Plan chapter because it's the top one. But if there's equivalency, Te Ture Whai Mana will still prevail over any inconsistency with national direction.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Janine, is it a good time to pause now for a quick break? Yeah, it works for you. Okay. We'll take 10 minutes. Guys, back at 11:10. Thank you.